My husband died in a car accident, leaving me his life insurance and all his assets. But his family claims I don't deserve it since we were married for only 3 years, calling me greedy and demanding I share the inheritance with them. The widow's gambit. The world shattered on a Tuesday. Not with a bang, but with a phone call that stole the air from my lungs and the color from the world. Mark was gone. A head-on collision, they said. Instantaneous. A merciful lie, I hoped, because the agony tearing through me felt anything but merciful. 3 years. 3 glorious whirlwind years, and he was just erased. His funeral was a blur of black suits, hushed whispers, and the acrid scent of lilies. I moved through it like a ghost, my hand clutching the cold, unresponsive fabric of my dress, a futile anchor in a sea of grief. I heard snippets of condolences, felt phantom touches on my arm, but none of it registered. Only Mark. Mark and the gaping void he'd left behind. Then came the lawyers. And the money. Mark had been thorough, meticulous even. Every asset, every penny, every stock portfolio, every last dime from his substantial life insurance policy. All of it, explicitly and unequivocally, belonged to me. His will, updated just months before, left no room for doubt. I was his sole beneficiary. The sum was staggering. Enough to ensure I'd never have to work a day in my life if I chose not to. Enough to make my modest upbringing a distant memory. Enough to apparently ignite a firestorm of resentment from the people who should have been offering comfort, Mark's family. His mother, Eleanor, a woman whose perfectly coiffed silver hair belied a will of iron, was the first to strike. 3 years, Anya, she'd said, her voice laced with venom, the day after the will was read. We were in Mark's spacious, echoing living room, the one he'd loved to fill with music and laughter. Now it felt like a tomb. 3 years is hardly a marriage. You barely knew him. His sister Sarah, a perpetually aggrieved woman who always seemed to believe the world owed her something, chimed in. It's obscene. All that money. For you? When we're his blood. His brother, David, the quiet one, usually overshadowed by his formidable mother and dramatic sister, finally spoke, his voice low and tight. Mark would have wanted us taken care of. He always looked out for us. My grief, raw and exposed, had no defense against their onslaught. I was too numb to fight back, too heartbroken to care about money. He left it to me, I'd whispered, the words barely audible. It's what he wanted. Greedy widow, Eleanor had hissed, her eyes narrowed to slits. You swooped in, charmed him, and now you're taking everything. You don't deserve it. The words struck deeper than any physical blow. Greedy. Widow. They branded me, stained me with an injustice that I felt in my bones. I wasn't greedy. I was just heartbroken, and suddenly very, very alone. The accusations escalated. Phone calls at all hours demanding I do the right thing. Emails filled with thinly veiled threats and cutting remarks about my character. They started spreading rumors among their extended family, portraying me as a gold digger who had trapped their beloved Mark. My own family, miles away and struggling with their own lives, offered what little support they could, but they couldn't shield me from the daily barrage. I tried to reason with them. I explained Mark's clear wishes. I even, in a moment of desperate vulnerability, offered them a portion of the insurance money, a gesture of goodwill, a plea for peace. It was a mistake. They saw it as weakness, an admission of guilt. See, Sarah shrieked over the phone when I made the offer. She knows she's wrong. She's just trying to buy us off. Eleanor declared. We want what's rightfully ours, Anya. All of it. Or we'll fight you for it. And fight they did. They hired lawyers, expensive ones, who specialized in probate disputes. The legal letters started arriving, thick envelopes filled with legalese, questioning the validity of the will, alleging undue influence, even implying I had somehow manipulated Mark in his final months. The absurdity of it was infuriating, but the sheer emotional toll was debilitating. My own lawyer, a kind but pragmatic woman named Ms. Davies, advised me to stand firm. Anya, Mark's will is ironclad. They don't have a leg to stand on. This is just harassment, an attempt to bleed you dry emotionally until you give in. But bleeding me dry emotionally was exactly what they were doing. Every day was a battle. My grief, which should have been a private, sacred space, was constantly invaded by their spite. I couldn't mourn in peace. I couldn't remember Mark without their accusations echoing in my ears. One evening, staring out at the rain-streaked window of the house Mark and I had made a home, a house that now felt tainted by the family's bitterness, a realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. They didn't want the money because they needed it. They wanted it because they couldn't stand the idea of me having it. It was about control, about power, about their twisted perception of justice. And I realized something else Mark had known. He'd known his family. He'd seen their possessiveness, their sense of entitlement. His meticulously crafted will wasn't just about providing for me, it was about protecting me from them. He had put a shield around me even in death. This thought oddly brought a flicker of warmth, a spark of resolve. He hadn't just left me money. He had left me a legacy of trust and protection, and I would not dishonor that. I would not let them win. The next morning I called Ms. Davies. "I'm not settling," I told her, my voice clear and firm. "Not a penny. Mark left everything to me, and I will honor his wishes." The legal battle dragged on for months. It was grueling. Depositions, interrogatories, motions, counter-motions. Each court appearance was a fresh wound, forcing me to relive the darkest period of my life, to defend my love, my character, my very right to exist in the wake of Mark's death. Eleanor would glare at me from across the courtroom. Sarah would whisper loudly to David, their faces a mask of righteous indignation. But I held my ground. I started to speak more about Mark, not just to my lawyer but to anyone who would listen. I talked about his kindness, his laugh, his passion for life, the way he'd always made me feel safe and loved. I remembered the little things. His ridiculous morning dance, the way he'd always leave me a note on the fridge, the quiet way he'd listen when I was troubled. These memories, once so painful, became my armor. They were the truth of our love, which no amount of family bitterness could erase. One day, during a particularly nasty deposition where Eleanor tried to paint me as a gold-digging opportunist, I felt a shift. Instead of feeling defensive, I felt a calm certainty. I looked directly at Eleanor, her face contorted with anger, and simply said, "Mark loved me, and I loved him. That's all there is to it." The simplicity of the statement, the sheer truth of it, seemed to cut through the noise. Even their own lawyer looked momentarily discomfited. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes, eventually dismissed the family's case. Mark's will, she declared, was valid and unambiguous. Their claims were baseless. The judge's words were a balm to my soul, a public vindication. Eleanor, Sarah, and David stood there, stunned, their faces a mixture of disbelief and fury. They had lost. Not just the money but the narrative they had so carefully constructed. Leaving the courthouse that day, the sun felt brighter, the air cleaner. It wasn't a triumphant feeling, not exactly. The pain of losing Mark would always be with me. But a burden had been lifted. I was no longer the greedy widow. I was Anya, Mark's wife, and I had fought for what was right. I still had all of Mark's assets, the insurance money, the house. But the victory wasn't about the money anymore. It was about reclaiming my peace, honoring Mark's memory, and standing firm in the face of injustice. It was about refusing to let anyone, even the people who shared his blood, define me or diminish the love we shared. The silence from his family was deafening after the ruling, a welcome change from the constant barrage. I used some of the money to establish a small foundation in Mark's name, dedicated to supporting young artists, a passion he'd always held. It was my way of ensuring his legacy was one of creation and generosity, not just a battle over inheritance. Life didn't instantly become easy. Grief is a long, winding road. But now I could walk it on my own terms, with my head held high, no longer defined by the accusations of others. I was Mark's wife, yes, and now I was also the custodian of his memory, and I would protect it fiercely, just as he had protected me. The greedy widow had found her strength and her peace. And that, in the end, was worth more than any sum of money.